Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Veg Grower Podcast. My name's Richard and I want to encourage and inspire you to grow more of your own food in whatever space you have available. And I do this by showing exactly what's been going on in my own allotment, my own vegetable garden here in Littlehampton on the south coast of the UK. Now, coming up this week, we've got a bit of an update from the kitchen garden where I spent a lot of time inside my new shed. I've also been down on the allotment where rain has made it difficult to do anything, but I've had an interesting conversation. And back in the podding shed, I'm talking about how I'm starting to plan my 2026 garden. So without much avail, let's get into it, shall we? Well, I'm here in my brand new shed here in the kitchen garden. Here we are, a third of the way into September, and I'm in the shed and I've spent a lot of time in this shed this week because it has been pretty wet outside. Now, I don't mind the rain, to be honest, and I've spent most of this year wishing for rain, but it does make it very difficult to get outside and do any gardening. I can tolerate getting wet for a few minutes, but after a while, I do get a little fed up. One of the great things about having this shed and having a greenhouse is that I can spend a bit of time inside here. And that's what I've been doing this week, inside this shed, my new shed that I purchased a few months ago from Power Sheds. I put up, it was my big project for the year, and I am so happy with this shed. One of the good things is that I've been able to get in here while it's been raining and just make sure that we've got no leaks, which I'm pleased to say we don't have any leaks. So that's a really good goal, to have a non-leaky shed. But that's not all I've been doing. Because this shed is my propagation shed, it's where I'm going to start a lot of my seedlings off, get them growing, and then move them on before they can go out into the greenhouse or the cold frames. And as we get closer and closer to the autumn and winter, it's becoming more and more of a place that we need to grow food in. Certainly start growing our food anyway. So I've been in here and I have just sort of had a bit of a think about how I'm using it. I've had a couple of months now of using this shed, tinkering around to see how it would work out. And what I've discovered is that we've got quite a good system. So on the south side of this shed, there is two shelves, one about knee height and the other just above my waist. And on each of these shelves, I've of course got my auto trays, which are great because they have kept any plants in there watered at all times, as long as the reservoir, which is on the top shelf, has been kept full of water. Now, this is working really well, I have to say. I'm discovering that my plants don't need much care as long as there's water. We did discover a bit in the summer when the plants were young, it was getting a little bit hot for them in here. They were getting a little bit blasted by some of the heat. That's not unusual for a greenhouse, and that might just be something that we're going to do throughout the winter, is pull up some net curtains that we can pull and close when it gets hot like that. So little bit of tweaking going on there, but not anything that I'm too fussed about. Something fairly easy to deal with. However, one of the other things that I've been thinking about is my heated propagators. How are we going to get those in here? I haven't got power in this shed at the moment. That is going to be a job that I'm going to need to do in a not too distant future. But I've got to do it right because electrics are something we cannot mess around with. It's got to be done right. But it's all very well running electrics to a shed. I need to know where I'm going to put plug sockets. I need to know what I really want in here. So I've moved the shelf that I had in my kitchen for quite a few years out into the space on the western side, opposite effectively the door. And what that's going to be used is once we've got electricity out here and those heated propagators on, when we start our seeds off, we will simply just start them off in here. Now this will still be in our plug plant trainers because I've recently bought a new plug plant trainer just to get started. Now I find myself really liking plug plant trainers. In the past I used to fill up some quarter seed trays up with seed sowing compost, sprinkle some seeds on top, let them germinate and then prick them out into plug plants. But recently I found myself moving more onto using plug plants, which I pretty much do the same, fill them up with seed sowing compost, but I put a single seed into each plug plant and wait for them to germinate and leave them to grow quite strong. This saved thinning out, but I also noted it saved on the amount of compost we was actually using, which seems counterproductive, but I actually found we used less compost by filling up our plug plants. Now I've got quite a few different variations. I've got the agrarian, which are fantastic. They're quite deep. They're quite a few plug plants in there. They've got a lid. They're a really, really good system. They're my favourite. Moving on from that, I also have my rubber plug plant starters, which again are really, really usable. They're pretty good, I have to say. They're just very expensive. We've also got a few other makes and models that we do use. But my most common one are these plastic plug plant starters that I got from Wilko's. We would buy a pack of 10 for a couple of quid. But in all honesty, I don't think they're very good. They're a very weak, poor plastic. And I found that when we were trying to get plants out, we would squeeze the bottom of the plug plant, try and get it out. The plastic wouldn't necessarily last. I didn't feel... And I reused mine to the point that they literally cannot be used. But I do not feel they're going to last a very long time. As I said, I do reuse them. I will have bits ripped off them and I will still try to use them. So I do make them last, but I didn't feel they were very good. Instead, what I've discovered is Charles Dowding's. Now, Charles Dowding is a bit of a legend these days, I think it's safe to say. Everybody has heard of Charles Dowding, I think. He's well known for growing veg and in particular no-dig gardening. He's a fantastic YouTube channel, really, really informative and keeps it simple. And he worked with a company called Containerwise and then developed their own plug plant starters. And I brought myself one of these to see how it would work out. And what I discovered is actually I quite like the design. I'm yet to really start using them, but what I discovered is that they've got a good amount of plug plants on them. There's 60 in the one that I've got. You've got different sizes. Made of a really good solid plastic that feels like it's going to last a long time, but the hole on the bottom is big enough I can just about poke my little finger in to push any plug plants out. So I feel that is going to be good. We'll see how it works out in the future, but I've started using it this week. I've just filled it up with some seed compost and I've sowed some onion seeds into that to see how we get on with it. It's looking hopeful though. It's looking very, very hopeful. That's gone inside my heated propagators, although as I say, we haven't got electricity out there. Now on the northern side I have set up, and I've had this in here for a while, my metal aluminium potting bench. And around it I've got some of my IKEA recycling containers that I filled up with compost and perlite, which is working out quite well. The table itself I'm finding a little bit too short for myself and I'm giving myself a bit of backache. So we might have to look at making that a little bit higher in the not too distant future. But really I want to build my own potting bench. That's something we will talk about in the future when I actually get round to building it. But overall, the shed is coming together really well. I do think this is a fantastic place to start our seeds off. It's 6 foot by 8 foot, so it's a good size. And I'm really happy with what we've been doing here this week. Now, one thing that it hasn't been tested is how it copes with a storm. And there is a storm coming through at the moment. So we'll find out in the potting shed later on how we get on with the storm. But for now, I'm going to head on down to the allotment and catch you up with what's going on down there. In the meantime, let's find out what's been going on in the Supporters Club this week. Well, it is that point of the podcast where I ask you to please rate and review if you are enjoying this podcast. I ask you every week, but it really does help. We do really see the difference it makes when you leave a rate and review. So please do rate and review. But not only that, if you are also enjoying this podcast, you want to help support the work that we do, then please consider becoming a member of the Veg Grower Podcast Supporters Club. It costs just £5 a month to be a member, but you get extra behind-the-scenes podcasts that give you an idea of what's going on here at the Veg Grower Podcast HQ. But not only that, once a month you also receive our monthly seed pack, and in that pack you get a copy of our mini newspaper. Gives you a few ideas of what you can do throughout that month, but you also get a collection of seeds that can be sown in that very month as well. And trust me, if you were to buy those seeds, it would cost you more than £5. As an example of some of the seeds that we have sown over this last week, we have sown some Mabuna, which is a oriental type of mustard. It's absolutely delicious, but it also looks good in the garden. And we've also sown something a bit unusual, tatsoi, which again is an oriental green, but it looks absolutely stunning. It's very unique and it tastes amazing as well. So that's just an example of what you could get if you become a member of the Veg Grower Podcast Supporters Club. If that sounds like something you would be interested in, head to the website theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk to find out more and sign up. We'd love to have you there. Right, back to the gardening. Well, I'm down on the allotment now, and luckily it has stopped raining for a few minutes. Now, of course, rain has been something I've been praying for all year, and now over this last couple of weeks we have had a lot of rain, to say the least. A lot of rain. It's been very welcome, of course, because we do need that moisture. We do need that rain in the soil, but it also does make it difficult to do anything outside. My time on my allotment is a very dedicated time for me. It is my opportunity to literally concentrate on growing my own food. It's all I want to do when I'm here. And most of my allotment is, of course, outside, not under shelter. So I have to spend a lot of time outside doing things like weeding and growing. But in between the showers, I did run inside my greenhouse and my shed and gave those a really good tidy up. I've got to admit, the greenhouse, because it can get very, very warm in the greenhouse, it is nice to be able to get in there and have a proper tidy up and smarten things up, ready for the winter season, which is when greenhouses really come into their own. I think we often think of greenhouses for growing things like tomatoes throughout the summer months to improve those, but really for me a greenhouse is for extending the seasons, being able to grow more in the autumn and winter months under cover. So having the opportunity to tidy it up and get it all set up. We've still, of course, got tomatoes growing in there, so it's not the end of the world. But just getting the opportunity to have a tidy up and make some space ready for growing crops in there throughout the winter. Very, very grateful for that. Outside, I've been doing a lot of weeding, because the soil is so moist that weeds are just pulling out of the ground really, really easy, giving me plenty of compost material. Got to say, the whole plot is looking much better for it as always. We are, of course, coming to the end of the season. It's starting to feel very autumnal here, and although brassicas are looking good, our potatoes have died down, a lot of our crops are really dying down, it still feels like we're getting somewhere, and we really are harvesting a lot of apples and pears at the moment, amongst other things such as cauliflowers and cabbages, all of which I'm very, very grateful of course. Now, what I really want to talk about on the allotment today is this weekend also saw our local town fair. This is an annual event held locally. Every town and village has them. They might have a horticultural show combined with it, where opportunity to show off their fruit and veg. Our town show really goes all out on it. We have local shows, photography, fruit and veg, flowers, you name it, it's going on in the show. But we also have exhibitions going on and local businesses and local charities just trying to drum up some support. I was there with our local camera club because I'm a committee member for our camera club. But of course I had the opportunity to walk around and have a look at some of the exhibits as well. I generally don't take part in any of the competitions. I'm here to grow my own food. A couple of years ago I did consider entering, and I keep considering entering. I'm more interested in growing food that I'm going to eat than showing. But one year I'm going to throw myself into it and actually exhibit some of my food to try and win the competitions. But what was really interesting is that our local council officer, who is in charge of the allotments, was also having a stand in this exhibit area. Basically, he was trying to show what the allotments do, and I had a really nice chat with him. I've spoken to him many times over the years. Got a lot of time for him. And he was sort of going through the usual, oh, how's it going, are you coping okay, and all that sort of thing, which is expected. And of course, all going well. It's been a tough year with it being so dry, etc., etc. But what I discovered is that what he is trying to do at the moment, well, several things going on. Firstly, we've got a waiting list of about 30 people for our allotments. Now, he manages around 300 allotment plots on several sites, with my site being the largest with over 200 of those plots. So there is a bit of a waiting list, nothing too scary. He's managing to cope it quite well, but there's a lot of people who sign up and then when they get offered one, don't really want it, don't realise the work involved, and so on. And there's a few people on that list who want specific sites. So it sounds scary, but at the same time it's not too bad. The waiting list does seem to be around 4 months. But what was really eye-opening to me is a conversation that he was having about how we can try and reduce the financial deficit of allotments. What I mean by that is we pay about £100 per plot, which means as an income from the rents on the allotment plots, he's probably bringing in around £30,000 a year, which £30,000 sounds like a lot of money, but really, throughout a year and everything involved in an allotment, managing an allotment site, that is, doesn't go very far. Obviously, his wages with the admin side and the managing of allotment sites. There's a team of people that come and trim the grass areas and everything else. There's sending out enforcement notices when people have weedy plots, taking people down. There's a lot of financial burden, and the deficit is quite high. And he's been having conversations and meetings with various people thinking about different things on how that can be brought closer. I think there's always going to be a financial cost to an allotment that the taxpayer is going to pay, but I'm a firm believer that things have to pay for themselves at the same time. So that was a really interesting conversation, and some of the ideas he's got at the moment is charging a fee to be on the waiting list, which might help weed out the people that are only really dreaming of having an allotment. Also finding people for having untidy allotments on each month. He's not keen on that idea because it's a real difficult one to police and to find the levels, but it's an idea that has been floated. Personally, I feel they're missing a trick. And I floated a few ideas. I've spoken about having talks going on to bring in a few interest locally. But my allotment site borders on 2 busy roads and we have fences around there. So I popped forward, why not look at advertising on these fences, local companies effectively sponsoring and advertising alongside the allotments. And with the passing traffic, I reckon it could bring in quite a bit of income. There's probably a lot of reasons why that's not available, but it does make you think the future of allotments is forever changing. It has to be affordable. The taxpayer shouldn't really be footing the bill for our hobby, but at the same time, every town, every village needs allotments, management and things like that. I'd love to know if your allotment has anything going on, or how they manage to cope with paying for your allotments. Let me know your thoughts. I've got quite a few ideas, but it does open it up. If we want to keep allotments, I do believe they need to be cost effective. Right, with that, I'm going to head on home, and I will meet you in the podding shed as we start putting together our plans for the next growing season.
Chopping all the veggies, sizzle in the air. Chef Scott with the magic, smells are everywhere. Water starts to boil, onions hit the pan. Recipe of the week, let the feast begin. Cooking with Chef Scott, flavors come alive. Tune in every week for a tasty bite.
Well, this week's recipe, there's a bit of story behind it. We were out walking the dog on Sunday morning. We decided we were going to have a roast dinner on Sunday afternoon. Quite traditional in the UK to have a Sunday roast dinner. We haven't had one for a while, so I was looking forward to it, but I realised we didn't have any stuffing. So I turned around to my wife and I said, let's make our own. I usually make our own stuffing for Christmas, but let's make something a bit different. Let's go for a very simple sage and onion stuffing. And boy, was it worth it. Really easy to make this sage and onion stuff, and you will of course find a recipe on the website. What it involved is, first of all, I took a large onion, I chopped that up into tiny little pieces, and then just gently sautéed that in a pan over a very low heat until really translucent. I then added a couple of cloves of garlic that I had crushed, and about 5 leaves of sage that I've chopped up really nicely. I threw that in the pan, cooked for another minute, and then I allowed to cool. Then I took 180 grams of fresh breadcrumbs. Now, whenever we buy bread, we don't eat bread that much, but whenever we do buy a loaf of bread, whatever we don't eat, we tend to turn into breadcrumbs and either stick in the freezer or dry out to keep in the larder. However, we had some bread, we turned that into breadcrumbs. We had 180 grams, and once the onion sage mix had cooled, we added the breadcrumbs to the onion and the sage mix, gave it a good stir, and then we added in a couple of beaten eggs, which just helped bind everything together. Mixed it all really well, and it all combined together really nicely. We then put it into another pan. I pushed everything together so it was all nice and tight. We roasted that in the oven for about half an hour. And there we go. It was lovely and ready. A lovely little accompaniment to our Sunday roast dinner. So there we go. Really easy to cook, really easy to try. I do love good stuffing recipes, so we would love to hear more of your own stuffing recipes if you have any yourself. Right, with that, it's back to the gardening.
Hey Richard, it's Maria here from Treorchy in the Rhondda. I just wanted to ask, I've been listening to episode 599 when you talked about growing pumpkins as a seed of the month. And I think, the idea of the compost heap sounds like a brilliant idea. I think Terry Walton does it quite a lot as well. But what I wanted to ask you was, how do you stop slugs and other things from totally annihilating the pumpkin? So I tried this with the Crown Prince variety this year. And even though I put some mesh and things around the root and around the sort of the growing stem, I still found that the plant was totally annihilated by bugs. I wonder if you got any ways of mitigating against that. Just want to say, podcast is absolutely amazing. I've listened to it right the way, more or less, from the start, from what's available on Apple Podcasts. And yeah, it's really addictive. It's really good, and I've learned a lot. So yeah, thanks very much, and thanks for taking my question.
Well, I just want to thank Maria for leaving that voicemail once again. It's absolutely brilliant to get these voicemails come in. Also want to say thank you so much for those kind words. Really does give me the boost sometime to hear that. So thank you very much. Now, the question about planting pumpkins in my compost heap, which is something I pretty much always do. I find it gives us really, really good, strong results for good growing spaces of growing our pumpkins, but it also utilises a space that would normally be left, well, unable to grow food in. So it maximises the amount of food we can grow in the space. Also find that we actually get really good pumpkins from it. But slugs and snails can be a bit of a problem. You generally will find slugs and snails in a compost heap. They tend to eat decaying matter, so really we want them in a compost heap anyway. But what we don't want is them attacking our pumpkins. Now, what I do have to say is when I plant my pumpkins out in the compost heaps, it's usually a week or two later than I would do when I plant them in the ground. That's because I need those pumpkin plants to be a little bit stronger, a little bit tougher in order to be able to establish themselves inside the compost heap. A compost heap is a pretty hard area for them to grow. So to get established, they really have to work hard. So I do like to have them a little bit bigger than I normally would have them before they go in the compost heap. But something else I like to do is just scatter a few wool pellets in the planting hole when I plant them in, and I find that tends to keep the slugs and snails off. I'm seeing more and more that people are starting to use wool as well. Now, slugs generally don't like wool. There's something in the smell of it, or something like that, that puts them off. And it's fairly easy these days to get hold of a sheep's fleece from a farmer, pretty cheap I have to say, and place that around your pumpkin plants, also covering over your compost heap that traps in the heat. So it makes it beneficial in many ways. Other than that, I don't have many problems with slugs and snails eating my pumpkins, to be honest with you. But other tips than that is obviously natural predators, encouraging the birds in to try and take care of the slugs and snails for you, and all the other methods that we often talk about. One of the tips I have heard quite often, especially this year, is using brambles and making a protective ring around your plants using cut off bits of brambles. Apparently slugs and snails don't tend to like the spikes, so that could be something to look at as well. Few ideas I have for you, but generally I find just getting them a little bit bigger before you plant them off seems to shrug off the worst. What also happens with pumpkins and many squash plants as well, and I often wonder if this is what's happening, is we get something called stem rot. And this happens particularly when the plants are young. It's when water just lands on the stem and it rots away and it makes it look like the stem has been eaten by something. And it is very common. It is very common. This is why often we have to avoid overhead watering when it comes to our squash plants, all from underneath. And when we plant them out, what I also like to do is bury, or half bury I should say, a plant pot in with the roots, so that when we water it into that plant pot and the water goes directly to the root. It doesn't land on the plant itself, and that tends to avoid any risk of the stem rotting because it's got wet. I often find that is the number one problem with pumpkins, and that's often where slugs and snails get the blame for. So that might be something to look at instead. Hopefully that helps, and I'd love to hear a little bit more if that does help. Now, in this segment, I also want to talk to you a little bit about making plans for the coming season. At the moment, we've had some really dark evenings, and I've found myself sitting in on these dark evenings, wet evenings as well, and starting to make my plans for my 2025-2026 allotment and kitchen garden. Now, this seems like the ideal time because I do believe if we don't have a plan, it makes it harder to grow our own. So I am coming up with a bit of a plan. And one of the first things that I always like to do is just write out a list of everything that I want to grow for the following year. Now, this could be things like tomatoes and garlic and cucumbers and chilies or potatoes. Just writing a list of everything that I really want to grow, and in particular any certain varieties or anything a little bit different that I want to grow as well. Now, this list will pay off in the future because not too long we will need to go through our seed collection and work out what seeds we have from this list, and then we can order more. It's also a case that quite often at the moment at this time of year we get some seed catalogues fall through our letterbox, which also gives us a lot of inspiration for things that we might want to grow in the coming year as well. So starting off with just a list makes our lives so much easier. Now, this does tie in, if we are going to go through our seed box in the not too distant future as well, we may find ourselves needing to use up some seeds a little bit quicker. So our plans can change. This is why we could, of course, write this list out on notepad and paper, which is what I've done for years. But I've also started learning more about using spreadsheets. So I've written a lot of this now on spreadsheets that I can carry with me on my phone as well as being on my PC. But I can also change them easily and work out how we're going to grow from them. So just writing the list is the first place I start. And I say this because I'm going to encourage everybody listening to do exactly the same. Write out a list of everything that you want to grow for the 2025-2026 season. And please do feel free to share it with us in our various formats. Now, another thing that I have also been doing over these colder, wetter evenings, darker evenings as well, forget that, is I have been just drawing out my allotment and my kitchen garden. Now, for years I've just used pen and paper. Old-fashioned, I know, but it's worked for me for quite a while. I have used some apps such as Veg Plotter, which has worked out really well in the past, I have to say, but I'm now leaning more towards SketchUp or CAD drawing, just because I'm doing it more at work. I'm finding more skills. But to be honest with you, a pen and paper is the easiest way. And when I draw out my allotment, my kitchen garden, all I'm really drawing out is the permanent stuff at this sort of stage. So where my beds are, where the paths are, where the sheds are, where the greenhouses are, where any permanent planting such as apple trees or fruit bushes are, anything that cannot be moved, things like that are just being drawn on this for the time being. This is going to pay off going into the future because as we work out what we want to grow, we can then draw onto this where we're going to grow it. So as a starting off, just starting planning for the next year, this is what I urge you to do at the moment. It's what I'm doing and it will pay off. If you do want to share them with us, then please do feel free to join our Facebook group because we do have quite a good community going on in there who do share a lot of these ideas. And I think it's a good idea for community to come together and share all these plans. Well, we've come to the end of this week's episode and I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, then perhaps you would be good enough to leave us a rate and review on your podcast provider. It only takes you a few seconds, but it means the world to us and it helps us get found by more people. Now, we've actually had a couple of reviews come in. Lynn, of course, says, "Hi Richard, I love growing herbs, especially different mints for tea. My favourite are grapefruit and apple mints. I do freeze leaves, so I have some available over winter. Also, lemon verbena makes a great tea. Herbs are so good for encouraging pollinators in the garden as well. Happily sat at my plot drinking mint tea and just watching the 5 different species of butterflies, also hoverflies on the tansy I grow. So peaceful, Lynn." Thank you very much for that, Lynn. Yeah, I do actually grow mint teas as well. I don't drink many of them, but I do grow them. We have also had Shavanders says, "Glad you kept Chef Scott intro song into the podcast." Yeah, I absolutely love Chef Scott's theme tune as well. It's a shame he isn't able to give us as much as he used to, but you know, this happens. But we're not getting rid of his theme tune. as far as I'm concerned, it's still going to be Chef Scott's area. It's still going to be Chef Scott's segment. It's just me doing the recipes instead. So please do rate and review, because we really do enjoy them. Now, added to that, if you want to get in touch, my email address is richard@veggrowerpodcast.co.uk. You can also find me on social media, which is also an easy way to get in touch. You can visit the website, veggrowerpodcast.co.uk. We can leave us a comment or leave us a voicemail just like Maria. And of course, you can become a member of the Veg Grower Podcast Supporters Club there too, if that's something you would be interested in. We'd love to have you there. I think that just about takes care of everything. Please do follow us on social media, but until next time, please take care.